Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the new news. I hope you're all doing well today. I hope that your friends, and your family are safe. I hope that it's been a great day today. And as we take a look here, you'll see there's a lot of information that's coming out around the world today. It is Friday. Congratulations, you made it through yet another week. So, hopefully you get to enjoy the weekend, whatever that may bring for us. At least here around where I live, that means a little bit of warm weather, and it is going to be apparently rather rainy. So I guess I won't get to enjoy it nearly as much as I thought I would. But with that being said, there is a lot going on in the world, and a lot of it, unfortunately, isn't always good news. In fact, a lot of good news just doesn't seem to make it. We always try to find something for good news here. We make it a mission to. We aren't always successful, but we try, just because there is a lot of bad news coming out, but that doesn't mean we can't put some good news back into the world. And that's because here at the New News, or TNN, whichever you'd like, we want to be able to be the continual global force, or be a continual force for good, be a global force for good, and we want to continue to raise money for people that need it much more. We want to be news that gives back. And so if you want to be a part of that, check out the description below. There are a ton of links, and we are asking the community to send us more so that way we can get even more places that we can donate to. We vet these links ourselves. We make sure that the majority of the money is going to the programs, to those humanitarian efforts, and not necessarily to the administration's costs, administration's fees, salaries, that kind of thing. So if you want to join in on that, if you can't give a lot, give a little. And go check out those descriptions. We have it for Ukraine, both humanitarian efforts and the war effort. We have it for Ethiopia, Somalia, and Southeast Asia. We're still looking for South Africa. That has been very difficult for us to find something solid to actually go and check that one out. And if you can't give anything at all, I can understand, but it's free to give us a like and a subscription. I don't ask that because I want to become the most popular channel on YouTube. I ask that because the more people that do that, the more people we can reach and the more money that we can raise. And we want to be able to put our money where our mouth is, and we want to be able to actually put fundraisers on every single stream. We can't do that until we get monetized, but you'll never see super chats here. It will always be for some kind of a fundraiser going to some group. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the news. And we start off with our special report, once again, in the nation of Ukraine. And Ukraine has seen a lot of fighting. Today, there's been a large mixture on both sides of news coming in and out, which is nice because lately it's been a lot of bad things for Ukraine. If you're pro-Russian, it'd be a lot of good things for Russia. But it's been a lot of Russian activities, and we haven't seen a lot of Ukrainian stuff coming out. But today, as we start off here up near Kharkiv, we can see that there was several things that did happen. And we're actually going to start off with a relatively bad one. And that is that a distribution center was hit near Korotich, which is just outside of Kharkiv. And what's important to know is this is actually a facility called, this is owned by a company called Nova Poshta. And they are basically a parcel service. They take packages. Think Amazon, but Ukraine. And they are worldwide. There's facilities in the UK, Turkey. There's even one in New Jersey, if you're from Jersey, here in the United States. Of course, they have one here. Since the start of the war, they have made their deliveries across Ukraine free. They are accepting donations for one thing, and that is simply for fuel in order to keep their trucks running. And they are also a major player when it comes to distributions of humanitarian aid in Ukraine. This terminal is known to be housing large bulk shipments of humanitarian aid that from there would get distributed throughout Kharkiv and other parts of this region. It was hit by what is suspected to be a Russian cruise missile, and at least one driver, unfortunately, was killed in the blast that we know of. It caused they landed it directly next to the building, in the loading docks for several of the trucks. And so I believe we actually have a photo here. Yep. So unfortunately, like I said, one person was killed, but that did hit, but a Russian missile did hit this facility. However, the Ukrainians have hit back. And so we're going to start up here a little bit across the lines as we take a look at Russian forces attempting to demine a bridge. The bridge was rigged to explode by Ukrainian troops. This is a tactic we've seen before, where they're trying to blow bridges in order to slow the Russian advance. It won't stop the Russians, but it will definitely slow their advance. And when they went to take the explosives off of this bridge, it ended up blowing up anyway. Basically blew up in their faces. And so, as you can see, did not go very well for them. And it's not the only thing going well for them, because we saw today a Russian column was captured near Saltivka, which is just outside of the main city of Kharkiv itself. So probably roughly in this area. This is right about where the front lines are, so this makes sense. But this included fuel trucks, logistical vehicles, self-propelled guns. So it's a very, very good start. And so let's take a look. And part of what makes the war in the East very different from the war in the North, when they were up by Irpin and Kiev and Chernihiv, is the fact that what's going on this Eastern Front, this part of Ukraine is a lot more open, especially in the Donbas. And what makes that important is it suits Russian doctrine. What Russia is attempting to do, what Russian forces are attempting to do, is they basically put a bunch of troops online, and they put them in mass, and they are attempting to, essentially, they are pushing troops forward, they smash into these lines, and then that is opening up gaps in Ukrainian lines, and it is pushing in it, and they then use that, and they push through those openings and encircle those forces. So they are constantly moving and probing, and they're doing this online in a very maneuver warfare style. They're trying to use the open terrain to their advantage. This terrain is much more suited for vehicles. Kharkiv, not nearly as much as, say, the Luhansk and Donetsk, but it's still what they're attempting to do. And as a result, Ukrainian forces are having to plug those gaps as they may or may not be opening up. And so you'll see a lot of Ukrainian forces moving, and they'll be fighting in one location, hold off the Russians there, displace, move, and fight in another location, and then fight them in another location, basically countering those movements. It's a very sophisticated dance between the two forces, and we can see some of that going on here up by Kharkiv. It's just Ukrainian forces there on the move. Nothing too crazy. But we do know that they are having to kind of shift around. And the Russians are doing the same thing. They have to shift once again. It takes two to tango. It's a very sophisticated dance that they're doing here. And it shows this is really playing to the Russian doctrine. But they are still having difficulty because while their doctrine may be solid, their forces are not as tactically well versed as Ukrainian troops are. I'd say Ukrainian troops are much better well trained, and now they are very battle hardened units. And as we move over further into the east, we have more information here. coming out of Rubizny. Now, Rubizny had initially been reported twice before the offensive, and that was because Russia hit 2 nitric acid tanks in those locations, including one that blew right over their lines and ended up gassing themselves. But Russia has stated, the Russian forces stated they had taken the city. However, video footage today, you can tell that the fighting is still very much ongoing and the city is still contested. So I will say that they probably have taken parts of the city of Rubizny, but definitely probably not the entirety of it. So let's take a look.
All right. You're looking now at Rubizny. Ostensibly, it was taken 2 days ago by the Russian army, but columns of smoke seem to indicate, as well as the constant firing, that it's still going on. Rubizny is basically one of the major points of contact right now. It was recently, they had basically tried to go in since last month, but only now are they actually properly advancing. But you can hear a lot of artillery and even some small arms fire because of the street battles that are happening not too far from the railway station. It seems to be a very, very difficult fight, which is to say that the Ukrainian army is not giving it up quite just yet. The reason why is because they're trying to prevent any kind of incursion from the east right now, while the surrounding areas that are also controlled by the Russian army are trying to advance into this salient.
And that is just a very small bit in a much broader scope of the conflict, because we do know there is very heavy fighting up here near Izium and in this pocket right here. We do know that there's extremely heavy fighting in Ruzhny, in Severodonetsk. In fact, we've heard a report that a whole new section of cemetery today, or a whole new section of cemetery had to be added at the beginning of the war for Severodonetsk, and now the total is up to like 500 additional graves in the city. That hasn't been confirmed yet, so we did not add it here today, but that is an initial report we have gotten. If we can get some more information, we'd be more than happy to share. But this is a very large front. It is, for those that use the imperial system, it's 300 miles long along this front. For those that use the metric system, it's 500 kilometers roughly along this entire front. It's a huge, huge offensive front line. But it is a much more simple strategy as a whole. The reason we say that is because before, Russian troops had 4 axes of advance. They had the north, they had kind of this northeast, the east, and then the south. Now it's just one axis of advance. It's a large axis, but just one. And they don't have to, it's a lot less deconflicting. They don't have to worry about, running into each other between Chernihiv and Kyiv, and these forces here running into each other and accidentally shooting at each other. Now everything is enemy in front of them and everything behind them is friendly. Supposedly. Of course, there's partisans, but it makes it much simpler for the Russian forces. And we also see them using a lot more combined arms warfare here, which is something that the Russians didn't really do. They did massive airstrikes and artillery strikes that were independent of the Russian offensive on the ground, which was, of course, their heavily armored push, which bogged down. But we see Russian forces using helicopters and drones and jets in very close support of ground forces, in a similar to, say, U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, however, this isn't without losses. Yesterday, the Russian Air Force took very heavy losses, and today we see them flying extremely low, once again, trying to avoid those air defense systems on the Ukrainian side. But we do have more jets flying within the Luhansk area today. very, very low. Very, very low. Dangerously low. So they are doing everything they can to avoid being locked onto and shot down. We do know that there were some pretty heavy losses, especially in the Zaporizhzhia region, which we'll get to a little bit later. As we move further south, we can see that Russian self-propelled guns were destroyed along the eastern front. We could not identify this exactly where this was at along the front lines, but we do know that Ukrainian 120 millimeter mortar teams dropped an effective fire mission on a Russian self-propelled gun battery, which was preparing to open fire on Ukrainian positions. They got good effect on target, and at least one of the vehicles was knocked out. So let's take a look at that video footage. So we can see here, at least one of those SPGs is sitting there, currently smoldering. I cannot identify what kind of SPG that is. But reportedly, this is 120 millimeter mortars, which got dropped onto this location. And those impacts are, well, they definitely were an artillery shelling. But once again, we can't tell exactly where that is along the front, but that is reportedly what was occurring today. As we move south towards Mariupol, yesterday near Manhush, we were able to see on Maxar footage where there was a mass grave outside of the city, which is supposedly for residents of Mariupol. Today, yet another one was found on the eastern side of the city via Maxar satellite footage, and we actually have image of that here today. So there were additions made on to a cemetery here. And then if we take a look, so cemetery before, cemetery after, and you can see that that's a very clear mass grave ditch that they have there. It is supposedly roughly 40 meters long. However, we can't independently confirm that, but that is kind of what we're looking at. Just outside of Mariupol. This continues to correlate with stories that we're hearing from people who have escaped Mariupol, from reports we had earlier with Mariupol, where they were saying they were excavating the dead that were buried by like their family and friends and stuff in the backyards and the medians and the parks, and they had brought in 13 mobile crematoriums, and that they were committing massive amounts of war crimes. We even heard some very heart-wrenching. We had a video on here that was very heart-wrenching that may have included one of those. If you go back to some earlier streams there. But there is a lot of information. There is starting to become a lot of information as more and more people have escaped Mariupol of really what's going on and kind of piecemealing things together as survivors are starting to talk. However, the story of Mariupol is slowly but surely drawing to a close as the Ukrainian Marines and the Azov Battalion have been put in besieged within the Azovstal steelworks facility with no real way of getting out. And the city is effectively under the control of Russian forces minus the steelworks plants. That doesn't mean they're still not fighting. They took out reportedly one tank, a couple of APCs or BTRs, and I think reportedly they took out one BMP yesterday as well. We saw some videos of them doing that, but we can't confirm that independently that was yesterday and not prior footage from the fighting. We have more information, however, today up from Zaporizhzhia, and that is to deal with what happened yesterday. Now, once again, I understand that not all of the footage we were able to get is necessarily great footage. And so, especially with anything here on the front lines, information is going to be kind of slow, and even once we get it, it can be at least a 24-hour delay between when it happened and when we see it. When we see it, and so to follow up with some early footage we got yesterday, there were 2 helicopters that were shot down. Originally, I reported a Mi-24 attack helicopter and an Mi-8. Today, that it was cleared up a little bit. Reportedly, now it was a Ka-52, not an Mi-24, and an Mi-8. The Mi-8 is still standing as being shot down, but we have better footage from yesterday of those shoot downs. So let's go ahead and take a look. So not great footage. You can see them shooting off flares here. There's at least one shoot down over there at the top of the frame. And then that looks like it's the Mi-8 there that's trying to escape and shooting off those flares. Once again, this was yesterday, not today. We just want to clear this up. So there is still a limited number of flares that can be used. But once again, yesterday was a very, very difficult day for the Russian Air Force. They lost multiple helicopters and drones, and I believe at least 3 jets yesterday. We saw the shoot down of a couple of those yesterday, especially up near Izium, a couple of Su-25s. So today they may have seen some more, but we didn't get any more information. Just follow-ups for some of the stuff that we got yesterday. However, finally, we are getting something out of the Kherson Mykolaiv Oblast regarding Ukrainian forces and what they've been doing. Now, there's been one thing here, and then a couple of days, and then one thing there, but they had a massive counteroffensive. It was quiet, and then it was a massive blast of information, and then it went quiet, and then now it's been onesies and twosies every once in a while. Today we have 2, which is a lot more than what we normally have. So, and it's some very important stuff. Now, Arostovich, who has reported before, in fact, he's been very reliable thus far as a source. He said that the Moskva, he reported on the Moskva sinking before anyone else did and confirmed it before anyone else did. And, of course, that one turned out to be very true. And today, they're reporting that a Russian field command post that housed roughly 50 officers was destroyed by Ukrainian forces in the Kherson Oblast. And we have a tweet here regarding that. And, of course, a lot of information is coming off of the UA Live map for a lot of people, because they are doing a very good job with their sourcing. But, so that is the first bit of information, but we also know that Ukrainian forces are fighting back on multiple areas, because another Russian column was destroyed near Kherson today, and it looks like the Ukrainian forces continue to press this advance. The Study for the Institute of War publishes a report every single day regarding the fighting, and today, and for about the last week now, they have been stating that the heaviest fighting along this front specifically is concentrated here on that western portion of the advance. And they do have some different gains. However, I don't have enough information to independently say this and move any front lines right now. But they're saying that there's a lot of fighting going on down near the Sandrivsky Reserve and this kind of general area. Once again, I don't have enough information to confirm any of this independently, so these battle lines remain unchanged until we get enough evidence otherwise. But that is the report. And as we move further south from Sevastopol, or towards Sevastopol, we can see we reported yesterday on a Russian submarine which is reloading its cruise missiles. Today we get more information. It is apparently officially finished resupplying and is currently headed out to port. And so if we take a look here, there it is, sailing off in all of its glory, I guess. But yes, so they were supporting forces. Reportedly, the ballistic missiles, the Caliber cruise missiles, which hit Lviv, actually came from naval forces, and so it's very possible that those could have been fired, or some of them could have been fired by a Russian submarine offshore. They have that ability to do that. We don't know. Could have been a ship as well. But considering the Moskva is sunk, it's a very good likelihood that it is a Russian submarine operating in the area. It's much safer for them to operate than a surface vessel. And then at that point, they would, of course, need to rearm since they expended those munitions. But some very interesting news coming out of the Black Sea today is Russia is sending a recovery ship, and they're not just, and that the most famous recovery ship in the world is a submarine salvaging ship. It's been in the Russian Navy for 110 years. In fact, it is that old. And it's called the Komuna, or Komuna. It's considered, it is, I believe, the oldest still actively serving naval vessel in the world, behind the USS Constitution and HMS Victory. It's like the third oldest, and it's the oldest, I believe, steel ship that's still in service with any navy in the world. But there it is. That is the Komuna, and it is going to investigate, quote unquote, the wreck of the Moskva. However, that also means that they are likely going to be doing some recovery, and that may include things that are critical in nature for Russia to recover. That could mean some things that are aboard that are classified. There's been rampant speculation about what Moskva could have been carrying. It could also mean just recovering the munitions from the ship, including unexploded cruise missiles, which we do know that Russia doesn't have the capacity to build enough to keep their armed forces supplied, and they are expending a massive amount of those. So it could be very valuable for them to recover whatever they can off of the wreck. There's also, once again, there's been very rampant speculation that Moskva was carrying nuclear warheads. We don't believe so, but it's possible, but I don't see that being very likely. But if they were, if it was carrying nukes for whatever reason, once again, we don't think so, but then that would be something they would attempt to recover. So, some very interesting news out of Black Sea. I wonder if Ukraine will hit that as well and send it to the bottom, right on top of the Moskva. And with that, that is all of the news inside the country of Ukraine. And so we are now going to move on to the international news. However, there is some very much related news to the ongoing conflict and to the international relations surrounding it. And so, of course, we're going to start here in Russia. And the first thing that we start off with is that Russian citizens could see shelling from Zhirikano, which is in the Belgorod region, a little bit of a distance from the front lines, but they were able to see shelling from some of the roadsides there in this village. We do have a video of that.
Я хуею, блядь. Не сюди летить, нахуй? Пацани, сюди, поближе хуяри.
Now, that could have been miles away, but those are some very interesting munitions being used, to say the least. I can't tell you who's shooting them or what the targets are or what they are, but very interesting munitions, to say the least. It's not your average explosion. And as we move further up north near Moscow, here just outside of Moscow in Korolyov, we see yet another major fire occurring, breaking out at a major research facility for the government. The research facility is reportedly for, it does research on missiles and rockets for both the space agency and the military for Russia. And once again, another large fire. This is the third one in the last 48 hours, roughly. So, at this point, this is the second government research facility focused on rockets and missiles and air defense that has had a major fire, as well as a large chemical plant that also had a major fire that we don't know how it could be connected or not, but it's starting to, from an outsider's perspective, 100% an outsider's perspective, this starts to call into question as to whether or not these fires could have been sabotage from within Russia. It could 100% just be coincidence. And once again, it's an outsider's perspective. It's my outsider perspective on the situation. But you have a large chemical plant, which probably could, depending on what chemicals they're producing, could be used for mixtures for propulsion systems, such as propulsion fuels, whether that is solid boosters or if that's liquid boosters or whatever. That could have been what they're using that stuff for. I don't know. I don't know what the plant specifically specializes in. We've seen their air defense ministry. We've seen their research institute catch fire. We have now seen a rocket and missile research institute catch fire. We've seen much earlier. We've seen their field off, or the FSB's field offices, cars being set on fire. We've also seen individuals throw Molotov cocktails at the Kremlin wall. So, I'm not getting. So we do know that there is dissent in Russia. It's not open, or at least openly reported, because these people will go to prison and or disappear for a very, very long time or forever. And it's very, but it does draw a lot of questions, once again, from an outsider's perspective. And finally, Russia has acknowledged losses from the Moskva. It took them forever. In fact, getting any kind of acknowledgement of losses, false numbers, true numbers, doesn't matter. Just acknowledgement that they lost something from Russia during this war is worse than pulling teeth. It's absolutely terrible. They do not release information at all. But finally today, the cries really got too much. The evidence was really kind of stacked against them, and they had to say something. And today they have stated, this is the Russian Defense Ministry, that one sailor was killed and another 27 are missing following the sinking of the ship. So, if those numbers are accurate, if they're inaccurate, we don't know. We can't confirm. Probably not. Just because, based off of Russian media and the ministry's track record of acknowledgement of losses, the number of losses that are confirmable by independent sources far outnumber the amount of losses that Russia has stated. And that's just the stuff that we see, let alone what we're not seeing. So, but yes, we can see this on Next to TV. They did, in fact, state that they lost some. And some more interesting news and a little bit of saber rattling from Russia. Keep in mind, Russia's media is all state backed. They had a huge crackdown on independent news media, and they basically got rid of them all right at the onset of the war. That way, they could basically control all flows of information inside of the country. And today on Russian news media, they are having a discussion, much like political discussions on mainstream media TV in the West, where you debate or discuss a topic that may be controversial. And, however, this is a state-backed news media, so this is all stuff that reportedly the state of Russia, the nation of Russia, has given its seal of approval for them to say these things. And following that newest ICBM test that they had, we do have video footage of them talking about nuking the United States with it. So let's go ahead and take a look.
У американцев таких ракет нет и никогда не было. Чем привлекателен Южный полюс.
А мы сразу знаем, куда ее запускать, да?
Ну, конечно.
Через Южный полюс, через Северный.
Нет, речь идет,
у нас только одна цель.
Нет, речь идет, конечно, о континентальной территории Соединенных Штатов.
Ну так, на секунду. Эта ракета, если окажется там, где, в общем, она могла бы оказаться в худшем случае, способна уничтожить какого рода объекты, какие площади, территории?
Я вам так скажу, что если 7,5 мегатонн будет доставлено на территорию, как говорится, нашего партнера, то...
Тут слово партнер очень важно.
Да, то такие объекты, как город Нью-Йорк. Хороший город, но его не будет. Вообще.
Одной ракеты.
Одной ракеты, конечно. Совсем. От слова совсем. Вот. Поэтому лучше не надо.
Красивый
американцы,
город.
кстати, они всегда боялись наших тяжелых ракет.
Slightly disturbing, to say the least. Once again, I'm not saying, and I can't say that Russia necessarily read over everything that they were going to say and gave their seal of approval, and then it was aired. I don't think it was like that, but that topic certainly had to have been approved. The general topic, maybe not exactly word for word what was said about the topic, but you can see that their words are very carefully chosen when they're talking about it. And their mindset is very interesting as to how they view specifically the United States. Joking about how the United States is a Russian partner, quote unquote. So there is a lot of tension between the United States. It is assumed that Russia's missile test was to show off that it did still have a working nuclear arsenal, because even that has been called into question due to the just dire incompetence of Russian military ground forces. They're just conventional forces are in such a state of apparent disrepair and lack of training that it has been questioned if their nuclear arsenal is even capable. And so that was reportedly a demonstration of that capability, and we may see more in the future, we may not, it depends, but it was meant to send a message to the West as they continue to up the ante and supply heavier and heavier equipment to Ukraine. And speaking of that heavier and heavier equipment, France has said that they will be sending some more lethal aid to Ukraine, and this means that they announced that they would be sending the Caesar self-propelled artillery system, and they'd be sending Milan anti-tank missiles. So very badly needed. That is two of the major hit list items for Ukraine. They want heavy long-range artillery that they can bring to bear on Russian forces because that is advantageous in that open terrain in the east. And two, they need anti-tank missiles because Russia is all about having tanks and putting armored vehicles on the forefront of their ground offensives. That is just their doctrine. We have their doctrine from when it was published in 2014. If anyone would take a look, I will be posting that link in the Discord. So if you wish to take a look at that, feel free to join our Discord community. It'll be there. But let's take a look here. We can see what he's talking about. That is the Milan artillery, or sorry, that's not the Milan. That is the Caesar self-propelled artillery system. It's not like most self-propelled guns where it's on tracks and a tank body. It is a lot of artillery self-propelled guns are just on the back of trucks. They're very capable of being used that way. It's still considered self-propelled, and it actually can be lighter movement for these vehicles. It makes them lighter and faster and easier to transport and a lot less expensive. But it's a 155 millimeter howitzer mounted onto the back of a utility truck. And it is one of many variants of artillery that Ukraine is getting sent currently. And what's interesting, and this is not something we have officially posted, but right before the stream started tonight, I saw something very, very interesting came up from the U.S. Department of Defense, and they stated that Ukraine has more tanks on the ground inside the country of Ukraine than Russia does. Which is mind-blowing, because before the war, Russia had like a 4-to-1 advantage on tanks against Ukraine. So, and I'm talking about 4-to-1 like devoted to the conflict, 4-to-1 advantage. Russia has a massive inventory of tanks. Most of them are in complete disrepair and would have to be cannibalized for parts. You'd probably have to take 10 tanks to make one good one. But they have a massive, it's like 14,000 tanks that they have in storage right now. But in the ground, actively serving in Ukraine, Russia started with like a 4-to-1 advantage against the Ukrainian forces, because Ukraine had like 300 to 400 tanks and Russia had like 1,200. And that's just tanks, let alone the thousands of infantry fighting vehicles and what have you. But now Ukraine, who has captured an insane amount of Russian armor, now has more tanks on the ground than Russia does, according to a U.S. defense official. So, can't confirm that, but if it's true, it goes along with what we've been saying for a while, that Russia is the biggest donator of weapons to Ukraine in the world, because they keep abandoning stuff on the side of the highway, and it gets turned right around, repainted, and sent back out against them. So we're with that. We're going to go ahead and move on to the Middle East. And the first thing we have is here in Israel. And that is that Israel once again raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque just outside of Jerusalem. Now, this has been a point of contention in the region for several weeks. And we've seen them raid the mosque twice before, and they are raiding it again today during the morning prayer. They dropped tear gas from drones. They used stinger grenades, which is basically rubber pellets inside of a hand grenade you throw, and it's like shooting someone with a bunch of rubber pellets. They did use rubber pellet guns and those non-lethal rounds to try and disperse the crowd, but the violence continues at the mosque. And so we do have some images here today of them physically just dragging people away. Once again, this is at morning prayer. So let's take a look. Now, I have, I could probably find a lot of choice words. However, there has been a lot of contention and a lot of unrest inside of Israel for the last couple of weeks now. There's been some back and forth between the Palestinians, who the majority of whom are Muslim, and the Israelis, the majority of whom are Jewish. There's been contentions for decades. In fact, since Israel was founded in 1948. And it basically is an ongoing conflict with no real resolution. In fact, the UN Human Rights Council, this is the only conflict, the situation between Palestinians and Israelis is the only conflict specifically mentioned in their charter for the UN Human Rights Council. And so that is how much contention is going on here. We've seen airstrikes, we've seen rockets, we've seen the use of the Iron Dome defense system, we've seen raids, we've seen shootings, we've seen terror attacks, and it does not seem to be improving. So we will continue reporting on this situation as it continues to develop, but we're now going to move on. And I'm actually going to go a little bit to the west here, and this actually starts to move into Africa a little bit, but it's close enough. And we're going to move to the west here, just across the border in Egypt, where we've already seen Islamic State fighters here conducting conducting some operations just in this region. Today, the Islamic State actually conducted a raid on Bir al-Abida, which is a village just to the west of basically like the Cairo and the Suez Canal. And they apparently seized that village and they took 3 people with them. They executed 2 of them. A third one was released. They also apparently attacked a village of Mukata and killing at least 4 people and injuring more. We don't have a lot of information on what's going on with that situation. There has been, the Islamic State seems to have a limited scope in Egypt, but however they do still hold a presence, and this comes as escalations of violence from the Islamic State continue worldwide. So very limited information coming out of Egypt right now. Egypt has gone through a lot of power changes, and they're going through a little bit of political turmoil from my understanding right now. And basically the military is in control of Egypt, if I remember correctly. So there may be some limited release of information coming out of that region at this point. So hopefully we'll be able to get some more context in the future. And as we move into Syria, 6 Turkish troops were injured in Aleppo today after their Kirby, which is their version of an MRAP, was hit with initially it was reported as an ATGM, anti-tank guided missile. Later it's been reported as an artillery shell. We don't know, but we do know that the 6 troops were injured. There were no fatalities from our understanding, and this comes as a couple of vehicles on patrol were coming across a bridge and near a checkpoint. Reportedly, this attack was conducted by the SDF, or the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is primarily Kurdish. There are about 6 groups in the YPG, or in the SDF. Some of them are Arab, some of them are Kurdish, specifically the Kurds, the YPG and YPJ. But let's take a look here. So there it is, burning. And here is the video of the strike. So let's take a look.
عمم كل حوائج الانتباه وتدقيق الطيبان فيك.
So there we go. That was a Kirby. The second one, the trailing vehicle there, was like, I'm getting out of here. Did not stop for to help them out, apparently. But it looks like they did all manage to get out of the vehicle. But however, we know at least reportedly at least 6 of them were injured. That's not the only violence going on. Pro-Turkish groups, militants, conducted skirmishes in the town of Ras Al Ain, Syria today, resulting in the deaths of at least 6 militants and an additional 11 injured. There is not a lot of information going on. We don't know if these are 2 Turkish groups that are engaging each other, which we have seen in and around Idlib, and north of areas such as in areas of Aleppo, like Al-Bab. However, it could also be against other forces as well, such as it could be against the SDF. There are about 40 factions fighting for control in different parts of Syria right now, and a lot of them overlap in territory, so it could be them fighting any number of people. It could be them fighting ISIS, the SDF, government troops, God, each other, who knows. But we do have some photos regarding that incident. Take a look here. Here we got a video. So that looked like a video. That looked like an MRAP type vehicle cooking off. It looks like some ammo inside of the vehicle was exploding because it was getting superheated and detonating. Which is why, if you're ever next to a military vehicle and it's on fire, you do need to get away from it. It will cook off if it has ammunition inside. It's very dangerous. Jumping across the border and into Iraq, we can see here in the Kirkuk region of Iraq that the Islamic State attacked government forces. They shelled Iraqi troops with a mortar. We do believe we have a photo of that. Now, there aren't any injuries, and we didn't see anything coming from the Iraqi side regarding this. For all we know, they could have shelled an open field, but we also know that the Islamic State doesn't shy away from anything when it comes to posting their stuff on social media. So could be a propaganda ploy, but usually it's not. They like to just kind of show off. There probably just wasn't really any real damage. That's not exactly a large mortar. So for all we know, nothing could have happened, or it could have just landed near the compound and it didn't even do anything. We've seen that happen too. And Afghanistan today has a lot of information. The first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to actually follow up on a report from yesterday. There was a massive IED attack at a Shiite shrine in Mazir-i-Sharif. And Mazir-i-Sharif is, there's been a lot of activity there for a couple of weeks now. But the Islamic State, which is majority of Sunni, they kind of follow Sunni ideologies when it comes to the religion of Islam, and they attacked a Shiite shrine. It has killed and wounded a lot of people, and then we reported that the cell that had conducted that attack was being engaged by Taliban fighters that night. Then that 3 of them had been killed or injured. I can't remember what we initially reported. It turned out to be a coincidence. That attack was not on, attack was not on the Islamic State cell. That was actually something else that was happening. The Taliban actually found and hunted down Sakil Azamari, who is a nephew and a member of an anti-Taliban resistance movement in the region. they went to his house and raided it. It just so happened to have been planned for the exact same day as when that happened. And then they got into a firefight with Zamari, and he was killed, but he also killed 7 Taliban fighters, including the commander of the operation for the raid. So he did go down fighting, but he was killed. They did not attack the ISIS cell. So that is a correction there. That information was cleared up today. They did not attack the ISIS cell. It just happened to be a coincidence. They did go and they found and killed a leader of a resistance movement. And so to move on over here into Kunduz. Kunduz is a province in Afghanistan and an Imam Sahib district of the Kunduz province. An explosion occurred inside of a mosque. It was a Shiite mosque, of course. And at the time of the explosion, there was a bunch of people inside who were practicing Imam and that kind of stuff inside of the mosque. Apparently, initial reports are stating that 34 people have been killed and another 47 have been injured. Of course, that we've seen a lot of controversial numbers. There's been contradicting reports on casualties at these things before, so those numbers may not be accurate. However, this once again happened while they were performing prayers in the facility. We do have a couple of photos here. So inside of the mosque, and here's the video regarding the incident. And it appears that I misspoke again, and I need to correct myself again on mazir-i-sharif. They did engage the ISIS fighters, but they stumbled upon the the resistance leader, and then they got into a gun battle with him. So once again, I apologize. A lot of conflicting data, and it's Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq, and to an extent Israel. And all of these regions here have a lot of different groups fighting each other. And it is a very, very... you could spend 12 lifetimes trying to researching and devoting your entire life to figuring out who is who and why they're fighting each other. And you would never fully understand it. It is insane. Once again, there's like 40 factions in Syria alone. Afghanistan has several different anti-Taliban resistance movements. They have the Islamic State. They have Al-Qaeda in some places. They have the TTP, which is the Pakistani Taliban that crossed into their borders. They have issues with Uzbekistan right now. They have issues with about every country in the world right now. There's drone strikes that's going on that we don't know who's launching them. The Taliban are in control. But you also have a bunch of different groups inside of the region. You have Arabs, you have Pashtuns, you have all sorts of stuff. So once again, I apologize. It is a little bit of a confusing situation. Moving on, however. Another thing that occurred was that an Islamic State IED strike occurred inside of Kabul. We've seen several of these now. This hit yet another Taliban vehicle while on patrol, and it killed and wounded 5 fighters in the city. So we can go ahead and take a look here. There's a picture of that blast there in the background. So, not uncommon. Afghanistan is probably the is best known for IEDs when it comes to military developments. There are so many IEDs in Afghanistan that they no longer remove them. They pave roads right over them because some of these are so old that they don't work anymore. And it would cost way too much money, and it is way too unsafe, that it's much easier to just pave over them, and if they go off to fix the road than it is to clear them in the first place. So that is how many IEDs are in Afghanistan, and that is how prolific their usage is. So we will probably see a lot of IED usage more than we will ever see any kind of conventional or asymmetrical fighting between different groups such as the Taliban and the Islamic State. There will be a lot less conventional fighting for sure. And as we move up here, and once again passing just over Pakistan and up into the Jammu and Kashmir, we see that there was a raid on militants, pro-Pakistani militants in the region by India. I apologize, India. And one of those militants was one of the 10 most wanted people for India. They were apparently responsible for attacks on civilians and military personnel inside of the region, and they said that they did kill 3 of those militants. However, 5 of their intelligence officers were wounded. There were no reported fatalities regarding that. So let's take a look here. We can see those intelligence service members moving during this attack. Now, it's always good to know what's going on in the Jammu and the Kashmir. I never say it's good news, I just know it's good to be keeping your eye on it. Because the Jammu and Kashmir, much like Israel, and the disputed territories within Israel between Palestinians and Israelis, Pakistan and Israel do not like each other at all. And the Jammu and Kashmir are one of the places in the world where a major conflict between 2 nuclear powers is likely to occur. The Jammu and Kashmir is contested territory and is jointly occupied by both Pakistan and Israel because both Pakistan and Israel claim this region. So it has it's in a semi-autonomous state, but it's claimed by both countries. And once again, both Pakistan and India are neighbors. They do not get along, and they both have nuclear arsenals. So understanding what's going on here and seeing if the tensions are rising or falling is very important, because this could this is one of these locations where these 2 countries are both very willing to go to war over this, but don't, because they don't want to be nuclear. They don't want nuclear annihilation. So it's very good to have some kind of news coming out of there, and very important that we hear what's going on there, so we can keep an eye on that situation and be informed regarding it. And in New Delhi, we reported on this a little bit prior, and this is the fact that the Muslim population, which is for all intents and purposes a minority inside of the country of India, which is majority of Hindu. You also have some Sikhism in there, but the majority is a Hindu population. There have been several clashes between the extreme, radical Muslim population and the radical Hindus. There's been some clashes, especially in a festival in New Delhi, and as a response, the government has demolished roughly 50 Muslim homes in the city. So let's take a look here. So, still those tensions continue to rise in this part of the country. So I was told that says buildings and not homes. So keep in mind that I may have misspoken. They may not all be homes. But still there is a stance being taken on that, and the tensions continue to rise on both sides, which may cause some more political upheaval. And as we move into Africa, we can see here some very interesting news, and this is because of the Wagner Group. Now, the Wagner Group, I have some very deep-running personal opinions on, but I won't discuss that a little too much here. But they're basically, to understand what the Wagner Group is, it's spelled Wagner, but it's pronounced Wagner, and they are a Russian mercenary group with direct links to Putin. Basically, they're an extension of the Russian military, and all that their extension does is give Russia plausible deniability. We've seen them used before. We've seen them used in Ukraine. In fact, they were one of the probing forces prior to the offensive in the Donbas near Popasna, and they were wiped out by Ukrainian troops essentially, right there in their own trenches. Today, there's drone footage here of them. What essentially happened is the French are pulling out of Mali, where they have been conducting counterinsurgency operations and advise and assist missions with local forces. And they have left a camp. They abandoned a camp. The Wagner Group went in there, and they stated that they found a mass grave of people that the French had killed in Mali. And that would make headlines if it wasn't for the fact that the entire time they went to this camp, they were filmed where they had killed a bunch of people and then dumped them in a mass grave and tried to plant it on the French. And we have the drone footage here of them doing this. We have them we have the drone footage of them staging this mass grave in an abandoned French camp. So let's take a look here. So we can see them rolling in there. There's a lot of vehicles that they bring with them. But here they are rolling into that French camp. Got a couple more vehicles then on the side of the road as they're starting to coil up and getting ready to dismount. You can see a couple of them walking there in the top left. And there you go. There they are, digging the mass grave and covering the bodies currently. It doesn't get any more real than this, folks. I mean, you want to talk about a blatant lie, they certainly tried to pull a fast one. It did not work out in their favor. And so I'm just going to stop it there. But this comes right before the presidential election in France, which is very, very important. And it's between Macron and Marine Le Pen. And Marine Le Pen has very obvious Russian ties. She is and that she has tried to downplay for the most part. And she, we've aired some things about her before. In fact, we aired where there was a photo of her and Putin, and they held up, a protester went to a conference, held up this protest, and she got tackled and physically dragged out of the conference. Which gives you a little bit of an ideology as to how she probably would run things. But she owes debts to Russian banks, which she is still paying in spite of sanctions. She has specifically said that she, as Prime Minister, would have France leave NATO. And she has been very vocal and has criticized speech against Moscow and Putin and the Russian forces. Is critical of the allegations of war crimes. Very much for someone who's running as a president of a country in Western Europe, is very much not something that Western Europe would usually see. And it's reported that the reason the Wagner Group attempted to do this is because that election is nigh at hand. In fact, I think it's today, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. I don't follow French politics very well. But basically, it's supposed to give a one-up for Marine Le Pen in the polls and therefore in the votes, because Marine Le Pen has in recent years closed the gap on her votes and her polls between her and Macron, which were pretty widespread in the last election. Now, we can't confirm this by any means, but based on the timing and who it's the timing with, it's plausible that there could be some attempts of outside influence on that election, because it would give Putin a little bit of a friendly state in NATO and in the West, if she was to win. And as we move further down over to the United States, we're going to start down here in Miami, Florida, where there was a banner that says Putin Julio. We do have a video of that plane flying with that banner today. And basically, that is a catchphrase that roughly translates to Putin is a dickhead. Now, rather vulgar, but that is what it translates to. In fact, after following the annexation of Crimea in 2014, astronomers actually named a star in 2014 Putin Julio, once again following the annexation of Crimea and during the rising tensions there between the West and Putin. So he does have a star named after him. However, he did not earn that star did not earn that name for a very good reason. And breaking news that came out today, actually we've discovered this while we were at getting some dinner tonight, ironically enough, and that's the fact that there was an active shooter in Washington, D.C., and police also believe that the suspect is already dead after he had injured 4 people in the northwestern part of the city. basically they stormed his apartment and found that he had killed himself, but they did not identify anyone. They're waiting to they did not identify him publicly. They are currently waiting on the next to notify the next of kin. But there is a picture there for you of the situation. There was a massive response from the name a triple letter agency and the police and fire department and ambulances, and they were there. And we did get this from Fox 5 DC. So if you want more information specific on that, you can go check them out as well. And that wraps up everything for the night, minus the one thing, which is some cool news. Because we always want to end the night on something good or interesting. And so we went with something interesting. And that's the fact that here in Estonia, in the city of Tallinn, that a 700-year-old ship was found right underneath the streets. So roughly 5 feet below. While construction workers were doing some excavation, they found a ship, basically sitting there in the dirt. It's about 700 years old, comes from about the 13th century, and it is a very rare find. In fact, it's what is thought to be an Hanseatic cog. So this actually predates the Bremen cog, which is very well known, and this is basically the only example of it that they have found. But they are saying that this is actually in better shape than previous examples found as well. So very interesting. Hopefully they found other things inside of the wreck. All sorts of things, animal hair, tar, leather shoes, tools. So they are currently conducting that archaeological dig, and so hopefully there will be some very cool discoveries that will come out of that in the near coming days and weeks and years. And so we do have a couple of pictures going on here. And this isn't necessarily uncommon. In fact, many times, with as much history as which has occurred in all parts of the world, there has to be archaeologists on site during digs for a lot of places because of discoveries like this. Very, very common. If you're digging in London, of course, the relics from World War II, they found an entire Spitfire one time that had crashed in London. Roman stuff there in London, as well as London was a Roman city at one point. But we did get this from the Daily Mail, which is a British news company. So if you guys want to check more information on that, you can go check them out as well. And with that, we have all of the information that we are bringing you today in the world. There was a lot. I hope that you guys have a general understanding kind of what's going on in the world today. And there is a lot of bad things going on in the world. I know we try and end it on a good note, but there is a lot of stuff going on in the world, but that doesn't mean it all has to be bad. You can always put some good back into it. And here at TNN, we want to be a continual force for good. We want to be the news that gives back. So please check out the description below and check out all of the different fundraisers that we have. Once again, we vetted those to make sure the money actually gets where it needs to go, and that the majority of what you donate isn't going to those administration costs, those salaries, when you want it to go to the people that need it the most. So if you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything, like and subscribe to the video. It helps us. We're not trying to become the most popular thing on YouTube. What we're trying to become is to be that continual force for good. We want to get to the point where we can be monetized and put a fundraiser on every single stream, and we can't do that without your support. So if you could, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you want to check out our Discord and join our community, we post announcements in there. If you have any suggestions for donations, or if you have any cool news that you're finding or news sources that we could use, shoot them over to a staff member over on Discord. We'd be very grateful. We could really use the help. We're looking for more international news sources right now, so we can bring even more stuff to you guys and give you an even better idea what's happening in the world. So go ahead and join us there. We'd be very happy to have you. I'll jump in and talk to you as well. I try and you can ask me questions, pick my brain. But with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off for the night. I hope you enjoy the rest of your guys' Friday night or your Saturday, if it's already that time of day for you. And hopefully we have some better news tomorrow. And with that, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. Hope you remain safe, your family and friends remain safe, and I hope that you have a great start to your weekend. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Good night.